Good day mga kapolsay! Thank you for taking the time to join us with our topic presentation. I, Caril Perez, together with my co-presenters Yvette Saginhon and Anika Romarate, will be discussing the concepts law, order, and justice. Law, order, and justice. Three words we often hear together, but each one carries its own weight. Have you ever asked yourselves questions such as what role does law play in our society? Is it a safeguard for our rights or is it something that restricts us? Then there's the concept of order. Is true order only possible through strict enforcement or can it raise from a sense of shared responsibility? And what about justice? Can the law deliver true justice or is there more to it than simply following the rules? Today, we are going to unpack these ideas and see how they connect and where they might clash. But first things first, before we delve deeper to our topic, let us first get to know our learning objectives, which are first, explain the distinctions between law, order, and justice, exploring how they interact within political systems. And next is to explore whether laws should reflect moral values or if they should be neutral frameworks for maintaining order. And lastly, hopefully by the end of the video, we should be able to assess the differences between fair outcomes or distributive justice and fair processes or procedural justice in political decision making. Okay, so first in our list is law. Let us try to solidify our understanding of what law is, its nature, and establish a common understanding on its importance. So what we can see here in the slide, law commands citizens telling them what they must do. It lays down prohibitions indicating what citizens cannot do, and it allocates entitlements defining what citizens have the right to do. So, primarily, law is viewed as a system designed to maintain order, protect rights, and promote justice. However, there is a long standing debate about its true nature. Does law liberate or oppress? Well, depending on its context, and in an ideal sense, law has the potential to liberate. For instance, laws that protect civil rights, freedom of speech, or access to education can empower individuals. However, laws can also serve as a means of oppression, particularly when they are unjust or when they disproportionately benefit the powerful while marginalizing others. And we also have question here to whether law should be based on morals or not. Well, this question is kind of tough to answer because, as we know, law often reflects societal morals, and it doesn't always align perfectly with our own individual or collective moral beliefs. And while laws can help enforce moral standard, they must also balance practicality, fairness, and protection of rights. And let us try to ponder on these and anchor our understanding to the nature of law as we go through our discussion. The term law has been used in a wide variety of ways. Yes, it is. And we have Newton's law of motion, law of supply and demand, law of thermodynamics, for instance. And yes, these are laws, and we've learned this during our high school days. And these are kinds of scientific laws, or what we call descriptive laws, that we commonly encounter when describing patterns of behavior. Laws are also used as a means of enforcing norms or standards of social behavior and are at work in almost, or not all, or but definitely all organized societies. And by contrast, some also view laws as distinctive social institutions clearly separate from other social rules or norms and is only found in modern societies. But in general sense, law constitutes a set of rules, including, as said earlier, commands, prohibition, and entitlements. However, what is it that distinguishes law from other social rules? First, we have here law is made by the government and so applies throughout societies. Next is law is compulsory. And we cannot choose which laws to obey and which to ignore because when once we disobey the law, it has a backup with a system of coercion or punishment. And third, law has a public quality in that it consists of published and recognized rules. And lastly, law is usually recognized as binding upon those to whom it applies, even if particular laws may be regarded as unjust or unfair. Law is therefore more than simply a set of enforced commands, but it also embodies moral claims, implying that legal rules should be obeyed. And in understanding what law is, one could not fully grasp its essence without learning the concept of rule of law. Dili nagbago ang rule of law sa ato paminaw because we have already encountered this concept multiple times. And well, all in all, rule of law is a principle that law should rule, that it should provide a framework within which all citizens act, beyond which no one, neither private citizen nor government official, should go. And if you're familiar with this picture, Sean, this photo was actually captured during one of former President Duterte's war on drugs campaign. A mother holding dearly its lifeless son after an encounter with the authorities in a bypass operation. This image start, sparked a reminder of the numerous EG cases that took place during the campaign. Well, can the rule of law truly exist when lives are taken without trial, without justice, and without accountability? And well, this raises a critical question then. In a society where lives are taken without due process, does law serve as a means of liberation or a tool of oppression? Well, time back to the question earlier. Does law liberate or oppress? And well, to answer these questions, John Locke has always regarded law not as a constraint upon the individual but as an essential guarantee of this liberty. And well, without the protection of law, each person is constantly under threat from every other member of society. Diba, when ato dumdumon ang state of nature. And the fundamental purpose of law is therefore to protect individual rights, which in Locke's view meant the right to life, liberty, and property. And next we have here the German concept of Rechtsstaat, a state based on law, which came to be widely adopted throughout continental Europe and kanang na-encourage ang development of codified and professional legal systems. And well, all in all, the supreme virtue of the rule of law is therefore that it serves to protect individual citizens from the state, and it ensures that a government of laws and not of men. And by contrast, Balitaw, as we all know in our study of comparative politics, kay the conception of rule of law sa UK or United Kingdom are uncodified, unwritten constitutional systems within which ang inner rights and duties are deeply rooted sa ila common law, and their laws are derived from sa ila long established customs and traditions. And in its broad sense, the rule of law is a core liberal democratic principle embodying ideas such as constitutionalism and limited government to which modern states aspire. And the independence of judiciary is designed to ensure that judges are above or outside the machinery of government. Law, in other words, must be kept strictly from politics. Yes, as you can read here. Moving on, let us try to get to know the distinction between morality and law. Does law, for instance, merely give effect to a set of higher moral principles, or is there a clear distinction between law and morality? Well, definitely, the relationship between law and morality is one of the thorniest problems in political theory. Kay on the surface mo good, law and morality are very different things. Law, yeah, a social fact. Law defines what can and what cannot be done, while on the other hand, morality is concerned with ethical questions and the difference between unsay sakto o unsay mali, and it prescribes what should and what should not be done. And again, in answering the question if the law should be based on morals or not, there are those thinkers who insist that law is and or should be rooted in a moral system subscribed to some kind of theory of natural law. And we have here Plato and his conceptions of philosopher kings. We have Aristotle, medieval thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas, and thinkers such as John Locke and Thomas Jefferson. Basta, all in all, kay the central theme of all conceptions of natural law is the idea that law should conform to some prior moral standards and that the purpose of law is to enforce morality. And we have here positive law, which sought to free understanding of law from moral, religious, or mystical assumption. Basta, very taliwas sa natural law. And the most extreme case of this was Hobbes, and we get to understand his take on positive law in his work Leviathan, which we are all familiar with. And also we have John Austin and his idea of legal positivism. And while political philosophers have been concerned about broad questions such as the nature of law itself, everyday debates about relationships between law and morality have tended to focus upon the moral content of specific laws. Like, how much freedom, like in this question, how much freedom should the law allow the individual and over what issues? Well, such issues are often arise out of the moral controversies of the day. and seek to know whether law should permit or prohibit practices such as abortion, prostitution, pornography, television violence, surrogate motherhood, o kanang genetic engineering, and so forth. And at the heart of these questions is the issue of individual liberty and the balance between those moral choices that law, order, and justice should properly be made by the individual and those that should be decided by society and enforced through law. Well, in many ways, the classical contribution to this debate was made in the 19th century by John Stuart Mill, yes, who in his work on liberty asserted that the only purpose for which power can rightfully be exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. And sa iyang nga ni work sa on liberty, John Stuart Mill argued for individual freedom, di ba? Asserting that power should be only exercised over a person to prevent harm to others. And what is this harm to others na iyang ginamin? Let's have a short recap. Mill's harm principle, di ba, distinguish between self-regarding actions which should be free from legal interference and other regarding actions where the law can step in to prevent harm to others. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I am Yvette Joyce P. Siginhon, and I am going to discuss about the concepts of order and how it shapes our society. Now, I would like to formally begin my presentation by saying a famous quote from Thomas Hobbes: "Without order and stability, human life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short." Hobbes argued that order is essential for human survival, and without it, conflict and chaos would prevail, making life unbearable. So imagine you are living in a world where there are no traffic lights, there are no laws against stealing, and there are no governments. So sa ato pa, if walay police, walay balaod, o walay government, life would be chaotic and disorderly. And that is exactly what Hobbes feared. He believed that without order, humans would act in their self interests, and it would only lead to endless chaos, violence, and suffering. Now, this brings us to our main discussion: what is order, and how does this affect our lives? The term order conjures different images to different political thinkers. Now, to put it simply, order is what keeps the society running smoothly. It refers to regular, stable, and predictable behavior. Now, in a well ordered society, there is continuity and permanence. People feel secure knowing that laws and institutions protects them. On the other hand, social disorder leads to chaos, uncertainty, and sometimes even violence. Now, imagine living in a world where there are no rules to follow. You can do whatever you want without even having consequences. Now, what do you think would happen? Of course, it would be disorderly and chaotic. Now, the virtue associated with order is personal security. Now, what does this mean? It is the ability to live without constant fear of harm. Now, when people trust the society is stable, they can focus on growth and progress. But when order breaks down, people feel unsafe and fear takes over. Now, this leads us to a very important question: is order always a good thing? At first glance, order might seem like a good thing, but can too much order be harmful? Yes, it definitely can. While order provides stability, excessive control could lead to oppression. In authoritarian societies, strict rules prevents chaos, but of course, it limits personal freedoms. Now, people might feel safe, but at what cost? No free speech, no choice, no ability to question authority. Now, where do we find balance in this? Now, some political thinkers argued that true order should not just be about enforcing laws or enforcing rules. It should also respect human rights and personal freedom. Now, without this balance, order becomes nothing more but control. Now, according to the book, there are two perspectives of what they think order should be. Now, first is the traditional conservatives which they think that order should be imposed and is linked to control, discipline, and obedience. Whereas the socialist is that they think that order comes naturally or occurs naturally, and they think that there is no need for such to be imposed. Uh, Order is related to natural harmony, equilibrium, and balance. So, how do conservatives and socialists view order differently? So, I'll just give you a brief overview. So, like, meron na lang may idea, but we will kanang delve deeper into this one by one sa next slides. So, sa conservatives manggod, they believe that order is maintained through tradition, hierarchy, and authority. Kung walay authority, people will misbehave and society will become lawless. Whereas kaning sa mga socialists, however, argue that this order happens because of inequality and injustice. Para nila, ang problema dili ang kinaiya sa tawo kundi ang sistema nga puno og poverty and exploitation. So, there is a conservative view. So, many conservatives manggod believe na people are naturally selfish, aggressive, and disorderly. Now, because of this, they argue that order must come from discipline, control, and obedience. So, mana nga para sa mga conservatives, they need strict rules and strong governments for them to prevent chaos. Kasi they believe na social order has to be imposed because it does not occur naturally. So, conservatives believe na humans are naturally corrupt and self-serving. They base this idea on the original sin, saying that people need moral guidance, and others naman believe people prioritize their own interests over the common good. Now, para nila, without laws and discipline, people will misbehave, abuse power, and create disorder. Now, Thomas Hobbes also argued that without a strong leader, people would live in constant violence. Now, he described life without government as nasty, solitary, poor, brutish, and short. Now, in order to avoid this, he believed that people should surrender some freedoms in exchange for protection. So, not everyone agrees with Hobbes. Socialists and anarchists argued that order does not have to come from force. Instead, it can arise naturally if society is fair. Now, they believe manggod na this order is not caused by human nature. Instead, it is caused by the unjust society. So if patas lang ang tanan and there is no abuse, then there is no reason for disorder. So Rousseau believed that people are born free, but society puts them in chains. So this means that unjust systems takes away people's freedom. He believed that governments and elites uses laws to protect their own interests. Now, is order about controlling people, or is it about creating a fair society where control isn't necessary? So, I think na the best order is one that is fair and does not rely on oppression. So discussions about order comes to address the question about punishment. Now, there are three such justifications that has been proposed, respectively upon the ideas of retribution, deterrence, and rehabilitation. Now, each of them is founded on a very different moral philosophical principles, and each serves to endorse on a different forms of punishment. Now, first is we have retribution. This means that punishing criminals because they deserve it. This is the idea that if someone does something wrong, then they must face the consequences of their actions. It follows the principles that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Next is deterrence. Now, this is the idea that punishing criminals discourages others from committing crimes. Now, if other people will see that they are severely punished, then they will think twice before breaking the law. Now, kaning rehabilitation is more of like giving second chances. Now, this approach focuses on reforming criminals so they can go back to society as better individuals. So, instead of punishing them, we ask na can we help them change?
Good day, everyone. So, I am Anika Jane Namarate, and I will be discussing justice. In our everyday life, justice is often linked to fairness and morality. But if we look into it deeper, it really goes beyond that. There are different definitions of justice from different kind of people. That's why there is really no fixed or a single definition of justice. Instead, it only remains as an essentially contested concept, meaning there are different people and political ideologies that explains justice in different ways. Procedural or formal justice. This kind of justice refers to how decisions are made and not what the decision is. It focuses on whether the process is fair, unbiased, or it is consistent for everyone. In a court setting, procedural justice means following proper legal steps, like giving both sides a chance to speak, having an impartial judge, and applying laws equally. And even if someone from the court doesn't like the final decision made, they will still see it as fair because the process was just. Pure procedural justice. So in this justice, the fairness of the outcome depends entirely on the fairness of the process. Meaning, sa diri nga justice, walay fixed standard kung unsa ang just outcome. Ang importante lang gyud kay patas ug transparent ang proseso sa tanan. Procedural justice matters because it ensures fairness in decision makings, which build trust, legitimacy, and acceptance of rules and outcomes. Even if people don't like the result, they are more likely to accept if they believe the process was fair. Substantive justice or concrete justice. So, unlike procedural justice, ang substantive justice kay mas ga-focus sa fairness of the outcome rather than the process. So, to differentiate procedural and substantive justice, ang procedural manggod kay it is a trial is fair if both sides gets to represent their cases properly. Okay na to. Tapos, ang substantive justice kay even if the trial follow the rules, it is still unjust if an innocent person is wrongly convicted. Substantive justice is concerned with real fairness in results, such as ensuring laws, protecting human rights, punishments fits the crime, and resources are distributed fairly. The concept of justice has been linked to the idea of just desserts, which means giving people what they deserve, whether it is a punishment for their wrongdoings or a reward for their good actions. This idea came from Roman Emperor Justinian, who emphasized that justice means treating people according to what they are due. We all know that people has different perspective on justice. And since not everyone agrees to a single definition of what is fair, different perspectives has developed regarding punishment and wealth distributions. First, redistributionists, where they believe that justice means redistributing resources more equally. The second one is deterrence advocates. This focuses on using punishments to prevent crimes. The third one is rehabilitation theorists. They believe that justice should focus on reforming offenders rather than simply punishing them so they can reintegrate into society. And the fourth one is economic justice. They look at how justice apply to the economy, ensuring fair wages, equal opportunities, and addressing economic inequalities. Patrick Devlin's theory of law and morality. So this theory of Devlin believed that laws should protect the society's moral values because morality for him is what holds a society together. So in this theory, there are two laws that Devlin mentioned: the consensus laws and the non-consensus laws. So the consensus laws are the laws that most people agree with because they align with common moral values. Since they are widely accepted already, people will follow them willingly. Bale, wala ni siya gakatanggap nga daghan reklamo gikan sa mga tao kay lagi sila man ang nag-decide and kasagaran pod sa mga tao kay gasupport ani nga law. On the other hand, the non-consensus laws are the laws that are seen as unfair or controversial because they don't align with what most people believe. And as a result of this, they often lead to public protest or resistance. The example of this is the UK's 1990 tax policy, poll tax, which led to a mass protest kay dagan man tao nga na-feel nila ka unfair to nga tax policy. In the topic justifying lawbreaking, there is a question, why do people obey the law? And the common answer will always be because it is the law. It is backed by authority, legitimacy, and people see it as binding. It has consequences and social order. Two types of lawbreaking: common criminals and principled lawbreakers. So, common criminals, we all know, is they break the law for their personal gain, for money, for power, like theft or fraud. However, principled lawbreakers break the law to challenge injustice and fight for a change, like activists and revolutionaries. So, to put a gist on it, the two types of lawbreaking has one selfish, the common criminal, and the other is driven by ideals, which is the principled lawbreakers. Political and social justifications for lawbreaking. First, we have political and social context. Some crimes happen because of social issues like poverty and inequality. When people struggle to survive due to the unfair conditions that we have in the society, they might resort to theft, fraud, or any crimes not necessarily because they wanted to, but because they feel forced by the circumstances that they have. In the second one, we have political lawbreaking. This refers to the individuals or groups who break laws not for personal gain, but because they believe that they are fighting for justice. For example, some rebel or terrorist groups like the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, or the ETA, Euskadi ta Askatasuna. They claim that their actions are political and not criminal. They see themselves as political prisoners if arrested, and they argue that they are fighting against oppression. Civil disobedience in different societies. First, we have if in non-democratic societies, civil disobedience is often the only option or the only resort they have to go through because legal ways to protest do not exist. Whenever the government is authoritarian, the people have no freedom to express their grievances through elections or peaceful protests. A good example of this is the suffrage movement for women's voting rights, where women back then had to break the laws just to fight for their voting rights. Meanwhile, in democratic societies, people have legal rights, legal rights to speak up, to fight for their rights. However, some still engage in civil disobedience whenever they feel like the system is being unfair. Even if democracy allows for free speech, minorities or activists might still believe that legal methods are too slow or ineffective for them. The law is the backbone of society. It maintains order and protects freedom. It sets the rules we live by and ensures stability through the rule of law. The idea that no one is above the law. Order is not just about rules, it is about how the people accept and trust the system. Without justice, the law loses its legitimacy, and people question its authority. More than anything, the law must be just, fair to all, and guides both the process and the outcomes. Therefore, a society thrives not just because a law exists, but because they are fair, just,